The president has a new chief of staff to clean up the White House. And the first order of business, well, it was removing communications director Anthony Scaramucci. But the president this morning stressed that nothing is wrong at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It's all fine. Tweeting, quote, highest stock market ever, best economic numbers in years, unemployment lowest in 17 years, wages raising, border secure, SC, no WH chaos. But after all these shakeups, will the administration get things back on track? Democratic strategist and the Young Turks political reporter Nomiki Coates joins the party panel tonight, along with author of Dear Reader, the unauthorized autobiography of Kim Jong-il, and host of You're Welcome, it's Michael Malice, and senior editor at The Daily Caller and managing editor at Olympic Media. Katie Freitas is here. Welcome back, everybody.
Hola.
Hola, ¿qué tal? So I ask you, Katie, is this an admission of failure that the chaotic White House ways weren't working?
Well, I don't think they're ever going to admit anything is wrong, like we saw with Donald Trump's tweets. He's just going to keep
They're never going to outwardly say it, but hiring John Kelly, who is the anti-Priebus.
Absolutely. I think it is an admission from at least some point, and I'm not sure maybe what made Trump get to the point where he's like, I need to bring in John Kelly. We're going to clean everything up. We're going to get things back on track.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good move, personally.
I mean, I think saying you're off track. So, you know, there are some who worry that the administration has too many generals, that this White House is very militarized. Not just the White House, but the Department of Defense and the National Security Advisor. So is there some benefit to having a four-star Marine general who understands the cost of life when you're dealing with a tenuous situation like North Korea?
I think it's only the members of the military who can stand some crazy person yelling at their face all day and smile and nod and say, sir, without going home and drinking themselves to death. I mean, who else is going to be able to sit and listen to someone babbling about coffee and trying to be like, yes, Mr. President, great point, Mr. President, you're a modern-day Calvin Coolidge, sir. I mean, this is where we are. This is our reality.
So you're saying that because General Kelly is battle-hardened, because he's been through a lot in his life and he's seen a lot, he's the only person who can withstand the impulsive mood swings of the president.
And he's had people point their finger at him and scream in his face, and he had to sit there and smile and nod and not bat an eye. So yeah, I think Trump needs people who are disciplined and who rely on discipline to get their message across, and he's not going to get that from politicians who are often snakes.
Yeah. Scaramucci, were you surprised to see him relieved of duty so soon after he started? Scaramucci, we hardly knew ye.
We hardly knew you, although many of us at Fox do know him. And what I will say about Sean Spicer, Scaramucci, they're actually, and I say this as the socialist on the panel, they're actually very pleasant people to be around. Yeah. So the fact that they got that insane shows what kind of White House this is. Like, I mean, if I were in that position, I would have melted down just on stage, you know, immediately. Yeah. So I wonder. You say that there's a lot of generals in this White House. It doesn't seem to be working.
It's really interesting because obviously, you know, everyone is trying to create parallels between Watergate and the Nixon presidency and the Trump presidency. I don't think those parallels are there yet. The one thing I will say is Watergate still generates so much interest and so much literature. The books that follow from the Trump presidency are going to be fascinating.
And I think the parallels are more like Warren Harding, where Warren Harding didn't have what it takes to be president, and the White House was a mess, and you had the Teapot Dome scandal, and he's having affairs in the White House cloakroom and all this other stuff. And Trump is like, listen, he has no political experience, and you can't take a politician, put them in charge of an international real estate conglomerate, and expect them to be able to run it within 6 months either.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Kelly has so much on his plate. I was actually surprised to see him take the job. I think he did it out of a sense of duty. And I think, you know, managing the personalities that are in the White House, calming the anxieties, still fixing the leaks, and then on top of that, your biggest job, wrangling the president. Is it possible? Can it be done?
I have faith. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that everything is a lost cause, but I think it's important to remember.
You don't have to say that, but
I think it's important to remember that he's been dealing with situations like this, but in the military for a very, very long time. He's not coming into this green to how to deal with people who don't want to listen, how to deal with people who are hot cannons, who like to tweet a lot, perhaps, who like to step out of line. He knows what to do, and I think that discipline and the decades of experience is going to be very useful to getting a White House back on track.
So I disagree just a little bit. People in the military are trained to operate and listen. Nobody in that White House was trained to listen and operate.
But he'd know how to teach them, and he'd know how to show them.
But that's why it is the opposite system. because, you know, chaos and order are diametrically opposed, and you could make the argument that perhaps order needs to work because chaos hasn't. Well, the White House may be a little chaotic right now, but President Trump and his senior officials aren't letting up pressure on Congress to repeal Obamacare even after the whole thing fell apart in the Senate last week, which I kind of loved. White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney said this yesterday.
Poll the American public and find out what the most important issue is to them right now, and it's health care. So in the White House's view, they can't move on in the Senate. You can't promise folks you're going to do something for 7 years and then not do it.
That's true, but no one believed in the legislation, and President Trump doubled down over the weekend, tweeting, if the new health care bill is not approved quickly, bailouts for insurance companies and bailouts for members of Congress will end very soon. But keep in mind, many lawmakers have said they are already moving on to tax reform. So what's really next for the GOP agenda? Are they having an identity crisis? What's going on here?
I mean, the Republicans, conservatives have no ideology of their own at all. It's the vilest political philosophy because all they do is react to the left. So, of course, they have an identity crisis. They've had it for decades.
There are some who are ideologically bound to cost cutting. And
that's not an ideology. That's an accountant's version of an idea. That's not a principle.
But when you look at some of the people who have been opposed to health care, people like Thomas Massey, Justin Amash.
All five of them. Name the five. Go ahead. Go through the five. This is how we win.
But the point is, that's an ideology. Very few people are tethered to an ideology.
Okay.
Do you think that's problematic?
No, I think this is why I'm an anarchist, because this problem is not solvable through politics. However, let me just say this. I think this is Trump being brilliant because the way he got the nomination, the way he got the presidency was turning the Republican base against the Republican establishment.
Yeah.
And by putting the blame squarely on their shoulders, and especially those three senators, looks like he's pulling a win out of a hat for them and making them even look more like losers.
But they don't have an answer. That's the problem. And it's really sad when the state of the affairs is that the Republican Party is being beat by the Democratic Party, which isn't really a party right now. So
I mean, even Nancy Pelosi is going on TV saying it doesn't matter how we do in the midterms. Like, we don't need to win in the midterms. Like, well, you kind of do if you want to get back in power.
I completely agree. And I think the fear from, some Democrats are getting the message.
They're both horrible. I guess that's the point. They're both in the middle of civil wars, and who loses?
Well, I think people seem to forget that Democrats, it's a very convenient thing for them to throw out health care, throw out Trump, because they can ignore all the problems going on in their own party, like their horrible fundraising efforts, the fact that they've done all these congressional races that they've lost. But on top of that, I don't know what Mitch McConnell is doing. You're basically saying, okay, Obamacare is going to implode. We're going to have to wait to negotiate with Democrats. It's eventually going to turn into single payer. I'm going to brand everyone in the Senate as a liar and go team.
Right.
All right, so I have a question for you.
Yes.
How excited were you that John McCain flew to Washington, D.C. to give the president the thumbs down?
I was ecstatic, especially because watching all those vile progressives on Twitter saying evil John McCain is getting on a plane to deny all these Americans health care and watch them die, and then the next day they were all eating crow.
I wasn't one of them.
I know you weren't.
I'm an Arizonan. I knew who John McCain was.
All right,
I trusted him.
And we know who you are, so the panel and I are going to see you in a little bit. But first up, brings us to tonight's trivia. How much did the Hillary Clinton Benghazi investigation cost? 3.9 million, 7.8, 8.6, or 11.2 million dollars? The shocking answer after the break.
I could have died, y'all. A couple times I took my eyes off the prize, y'all. I know a few people play.
What? Hi. So good to have. Oh, don't be too quick to brag about how smart you are, Einstein, because according to an op-ed from the University of Iowa newspaper, intelligence is, quote, nothing to be proud of. Right, says the dummy. The student columnist Dan Williams calls it cognitive privilege and argues that being smart is a privilege you're born with. Is anyone who believes this line of thinking born with cognitive deficiency? The party panel is back. Namiki Konst, Michael Malice, and Katie Freitas. I guess the biggest problem with his argument is the assumption that intelligence is an immutable quality. It is something that you were born with, it is completely biological, and it is also something that cannot be influenced or changed.
Which is dumb because he works at a university. He works at a college. That's all about becoming smarter. But I mean, the basic point of all of this is that it's liberals trying to make people feel better when they're perhaps not as smart as someone else. else. And it's saying you don't have to work, you don't have to strive, you don't have to learn, you don't have to seek something better. You're just fine the way you are, and the smart people are the bad ones.
Smart people aren't the bad ones, are they?
Well, my IQ.
Are we the bad ones?
You're women. Listen, I have a 160 IQ, so I'm 4 standard deviations above the mean. But what he's speaking to is, look it up, sisters. John Rawls' A Theory of Justice is the basis of modern leftism, and what
The veil of justice.
Right, and his idea is if you're born with any sort of advantage, you owe it to other people to kind of apologize for that and have to compensate for that to other people.
Yeah.
So this is what he's saying, kind of like if you're born tall, it's a problem. If you're born smart, it's a problem. And I disagree with you a little bit. IQ is largely heritable, but however, we all know plenty of smart people who do nothing with their intelligence.
Yeah. Right.
So just because you're born with this toolbox and you don't apply yourself, you're not going to accomplish anything in your life.
But there are also aspects to intelligence that can be influenced
Of course.
with outside factors, which is something that his premise completely...
Of course, both for the better and for the worse.
But I don't think that's a liberal thing or a conservative thing. In fact, I'm a liberal, and I believe that if a mother feeds their child during early years, their brain develops better. I mean, there are all these different outside influences. It's all about aptitude. It's not intelligence.
Yes.
Isn't about are you above everybody else or not. It's not like you walk out into the world and you know more than everybody else.
I do.
It's aptitude, and you are willing, but it's also arrogance. And so if you're humble and you're able to take in information willfully, then you will become smarter. What is it? 2 ears, 1 mouth.
So
Listen twice
does
as
that
much.
mean attractive people should shame themselves into wearing burlap and no makeup?
The problem with attractive people is they get more opportunities than the smart people. So the smart people have to work just a little bit harder, which makes them smarter.
Smart, attractive people.
I know.
I know.
I got it made.
They're TV stars. Yes.
Oh, thank you guys so much, Katie, Michael, and Nomi. Don't worry. We'll smother him with pillows during the break. Coming up, I'm going to ask a bunch of kids about what's going on in the world of politics. So what do they think of Anthony Scaramucci, Bernie Sanders, and of course, Hillary Clinton? Third grade news is next. Real news or fake news? Hillary Clinton wants to make it illegal for kids to have fun.